Today on Wolf Ridge Woodworking, we're going to make a wooden pin, but not just any ordinary pin. It's a fly fishing pin. I'll show you more about that in a second. So in today's project, we are going to need a few tools. I've got them here laid out on the table. First and foremost, we need a piece of wood or acrylic. This happens to be a piece of stabilized maple burl. We need a pin kit. I got this from Penn State. So there is the, well, if it focuses, there is the model number if you're interested. And I'll have links to these in the description. I'm going to need some sort of turning tool. In this, I am using a rockler round carbide tool. Again, it's dealer's choice on what you want to use, but I like turning with these. The tube, I'm going to move this before it goes flying everywhere. The kit comes with this brass tube. So you're going to drill a hole in the wood, and then we're going to super glue this brass tube in, and that's what all the components stick to. So with that, we're going to need super glue, and the super glue not only holds that brass tube in, but it's actually going to act as a finish on this. It'll become more like a piece of plastic with a very good shine. We get that shine by first sanding it with sandpaper. May not be able to see it in frame here, but I've got from 150 up to 400 sandpaper. I'll sand it with that, and then we'll put it super glue, and then we're going to finish it with these wet sanding pads that goes up to 12,000, so it gets a really, really shiny finish. Other things we're going to need is a 3/8 drill bit, a pencil to mark the blank, the instructions. I use this to square off the end so that when you assemble the pin, there's not an angle, because if I were to cut it freehand, I know me, it would be more of a 42 angle, and so you'd see a gap. But this helps, sand that flush, so it's a perfect, mount to the pin. We're going to use the pin press here to assemble the pin and press the components together. And then finally, we're going to use this chuck with pin jaws in it, and that's what's going to hold the pin in so that I can drill a straight hole. So those are the components that you need to get started. Oh, and then here, this is what the wood's going to actually mount to. So once the pin's in here, it's going to go onto this, and this is what's going to go onto the lathe and turn, and then that's what's going to allow us to turn that. So there are a couple of different options that you can do what they call turn between centers. So you won't have any of this. You've got two bushings on the end, and those goes in between your live centers. I like this. It just seems pretty easy and straightforward. So that's what I use. But again, you can choose to have something different. I'll have links to all of these in the description in case you want to build something similar to this or any other pin. I just realized I'm missing the most important thing, and that's tunes. So where did I put them? Where did I leave them? Oh, I think I know where. Come with me. All right, I got them. So now we can get started. So the first thing that we have to do is mark where we're going to cut the blank according to the tube size. So we simply just line up the tube, get a mark, and I tend to leave maybe 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/16 of an inch on either side just to make sure that I've got it measured correctly. So now we're going to take it to the bandsaw and cut it. Okay, so now that we've got our blank cut and we've got this, I never throw anything away. So I'm going to keep this up in my scrap bin, and we'll use it another day. So now we need to mount this in our chuck. So we are going to just load it up. And so what we're doing here is we are just going to drill a hole straight through so that we can mount our brass tube. So one thing to note, we are going to be turning this at 500 RPM on the lathe, and that's just to keep the heat down low, and it's the best speed that I have found for drilling holes. And so now we are going to glue the tube into the wooden blank, and we are going to be using medium CA glue. I put a little parchment paper down on the surface so any glue that seeps out doesn't stick the blank to the surface. So I'm just going to take the blank and apply a liberal amount of glue all the way around. Some will seep off, but that's okay. So certainly don't put any down where your fingers are. So, and then we just stick it in and we just rotate it just to get the glue all the way around. And then just make sure that it's just past the surface. And what I like to do is just come in and try to get as much of the glue off, wipe it off the surface here, and it just helps so that I can reuse this. And so now we're going to leave this here for a little bit, and probably maybe 10-15 minutes. Then make sure that the glue is dry, and then we'll go on to the next step. And for this one, we're going to put the blank on, and what we're going to do is just going to rotate it a little bit at a time, check it, and make sure once we see the brass tube in there at the end, then we'll know that we've sanded far enough. So let's get started. And now the blank is squared off, and now we can take it to the lathe and start making a pen out of it. Okay, so I have it set up in the lathe. I've got the proper bushings installed on either end, and what I'm going to do is turn the pen blank down to those bushings because that's the proper size bushings for this pen kit. When I assemble it, you'll see what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to turn this round and bring it down to that pen, the tubes, I should say, and then we'll go ahead and take it to the next step. I'm going to turn this at probably around 1800 RPM, and we'll see how that turns, and then I may adjust it accordingly depending on how I feel like it's cutting, if it's chipping out, or if I'm getting a good clean finish on it. So here we go. So I'm going to switch over to my square cutter real quick, just to see if I can get a straight cut on it. Sometimes I find with the round cutter that it doesn't give me a kind of a straight cut. So I'm just going to do some finishing cuts on it with this now that I've got it turned down to a little bit closer to where it's going to finish up. There we go. That should do it. Okay, that feels good. So now what we're going to do is we are going to do some sanding. We're going to start at 150, go to 240, go to 320, and then finally finish at 400. I'm going to, in between grits, I'm going to be stopping the lathe and sanding this way to take some of the circular scratches out that the sanding paper leaves. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that now. I'm going to move my tool rest out of the way. Now that we've got it sanded, we need to change out the metal bushings here and put on these nylon bushings so that when we put the super glue on, it doesn't stick to the bushings and we can get it off. We are going to clean it with denatured alcohol, get all the dust off, and make sure that all of our fingerprints are off of it. One great thing about cleaning it with denatured alcohol is that you also get a kind of a preview with what the wood's going to look like. This is again a maple burl, and it's just absolutely stunning with the burl in there, and that grain just pops when you do that. Really looking forward to seeing what it looks like when I put the super glue finish on it. So now that we've cleaned it with the alcohol, we're just going to let the lathe spin so that it can get some of that alcohol off and make sure that it's completely dry, because one of the things you don't want is to put the super glue on with it behind there, because what it'll do is it'll get hazy. So now we're going to apply the CA glue finish. I put a piece of cloth down here just to protect the lathe bed from dripping CA glue. I've also, instead of using a glove, I've just put a little piece of painter's tape on my finger so that when I apply the glue, the paper towel doesn't stick to my fingers. So we are going to apply probably 5 coats of thin CA, and then we are going to apply 3 coats of medium. And then we're going to take the plastic bushings off, or it's a HPVE, something like that, bushings, and put our metal bushings on. And then we are going to wet sand with, it's called micro mesh, and it goes up to 12,000 grit. It goes from 1,500 up to 12,000 grit, and that gives us a mirror-like finish. They're color-coded, so I've got a chart up on my wall so I know exactly what they are. So just going to run it back and forth, and again, this is just going to kind of even out that super glue a little bit more and really give us a mirror finish, and then we'll put some polish on it. So I'm just going to go through the grits, and I'll see you back here. That'll do it, and it's got a beautiful shine on it. So now what I'm going to do is apply this Hut Ultra Gloss plastic polish, and again, it's just going to give a even higher shine to this. So I'm going to turn the lathe back on. I'm going to turn it down to probably about 500, just to barely move it, maybe a little less, just to apply it. So I'm going to apply. I've already shaken it, so now I'm just going to apply a little bit to the cloth, and then we're going to turn the lathe speed up. Just apply a little bit of pressure, and I think that's going to do it. So let's, before we put another coat on, let's take a look at it. You know what? I think 1 coat is going to do it. And that grain just pops as you turn it. You can see the shimmer. I think there's a word for it, but the word escapes me. Maybe somebody can comment down below. But it's absolutely beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to take it off the lathe and bring it to the assembly table, and we'll put this thing together. Okay, and now we are ready for assembly. Most of the parts are just going to be screwed together. On this particular pin kit, we are just going to use the pin press for one. So the first thing that we're going to do is start off by putting the spring onto the pin refill. We're going to then insert it into the cap, or the tip assembly, I should say. And then we're going to install the transmission mechanism. And then we can actually, if you guys can see it, just make sure that the transmission works, and it is working and it's smooth. So this is going to actually manually press into the other end of the cap. It's really cool. There's a guy fishing. It's a wildlife scene. It's a really, let's see if that'll focus. It won't focus. Okay, but I'll take some pictures at the end so that you can see a little bit more of the detail. So now what we need to do is put the cap onto the the clip onto the pin assembly, and on the cap there is a fish with a fishing line. So again, this is the fly fishing kit. So, and then on the clip it's a little fly fishing rod, which is really, really cool. So then what we need to do is make sure that we align the fishing line on the cap with the fishing rod. Then we are going to take this, and let's see if we can find a spot. I think right here is a good spot. So let's see, probably have to undo a couple more of these clips. And now we can actually start to push this on, make sure we are aligned properly. There we go. So it's a really good tight finish. This is where I was talking about on using that the sander to make sure that we got this really square, so that when we press it into the pin assembly, it makes a really tight flush finish. So then all it is a matter of just pushing this assembly together. It's tight, and that's good. And so now, we can make the action work, and it's a beautiful pin. And so now what I'll do, now that the assembly is done, I will go in and I will take some still pictures of it and put them at the end. So thank you again for joining me on another project. I really enjoyed making pens. It was the very first thing that I started to do. It's a quick, thing that you can do, really only about 45 minutes. So it is a really quick and fun project, and there's nothing more satisfying than having, a really beautiful pen when you're going to sign things. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you on the next project.